Welcome. I'm Liz Taylor, ocean explorer, naturalist, and entrepreneur.
I'm Sylvia Earle. I am an oceanographer, explorer, the National Geographic founder of Mission Blue, and an ocean elder. Thank you, ocean elders, for hosting this program.
This is our show, Dive In, where we host informal and open conversations with the ocean community on topics of wonder and interest. And we're glad to be back. We hope everyone's made some time to get outside and enjoy some time outdoors. You can ask questions later on during the show by putting them in the Q&A box, and we'll get on and answer as many as we can towards the end of the program. And we'll add some links in the chat box for more information. And before we get going today, we want to remind everyone that the world is blue.
It is blue.
I'll share the screen in a minute. but I'm so excited to dive in with our wonderful guest today, a fellow ocean elder, Don Walsh. Hello, Don.
Hi there. How are you keeping today? The two of you.
We are doing very well. I'm going to share the screen.
Here we go.
Oh, my Lord.
Down we go. No, up we go.
Up we go. Into our blue world.
The blue face of the ocean. Oh, there you are.
And the smiling face of Don. Don, you're a fellow ocean elder and with a long and storied history of diving and marine contracting and submarining and so much more. We're just so grateful to have you join us today.
And here with some of your fellow ocean elders.
Yeah, Jackson Brown there on the far left, and then Noah Thompson, who was our host that night. Moi, and there's Sylvia on the right.
And there are about a dozen more of us looking at shadows.
That was a good time out there.
That's excellent. You know, people have been trying to explore the ocean for a very long time, and direct exploration has really just driven people to do some wild and crazy things.
Still doing it.
Especially this guy.
Yes, explain yourself, would you?
I'm going to make my last dive this year. I figure this is my year of last. I'm going to make my last trip as a lecturer on cruise ships, my last dive, and my last flight in an airplane as a pilot. Those are the three things on my bucket list for this year.
Well, this goes way back to one of your early dives.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful.
Yes. Yeah, actually, it was done in San Diego. You can see the tip of Shelter Island sticking out there right below the bow. And this is when we were bringing it over to the Navy lab in San Diego and putting it up on the cradle for maintenance.
Could you share? Most people probably don't know how you got to be the pilot of this amazing device and the first to descend to the deepest part of the ocean.
Do you really want to know?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Inquiring minds want to know.
I was, against my will, drafted to be on the staff of the submarine flotilla commander in San Diego, who had responsibility for 27 submarines, two submarine tender ships, two submarine rescue ships, and he was a four-stripe captain. And now that many ships you're responsible for, you should have been an admiral and you should have had an aide. So they concocted a scheme where they would Shanghai a qualified, wearing the dolphins, submarine lieutenant, just coming back from deployment to the Western Pacific. And you would come up on that staff for maybe 6 weeks. So we were kind of a faux aide. And I was the first. Well, after I had gone out with the Commodore, my boss, to greet returning submarines, I didn't hear you talk about me getting relieved because I'm a sailor. I want to go back to sea. That's what I wanted to do, really enjoy it. So I asked the Commodore, I said, I don't want to complain. I really love working here, but I would, like to go back to sea if I can. He says, no, well, you're just doing such a good job. We'd like to keep you. And I thought, oh dear. And now here's a convergence, karma. I'm working in my office, sort of a tin shed on top of this submarine tender, and the door opens and in comes this rather tall guy, and he says, "My name is Andy Recknitz, sir, and I'm with the bathyscaphe." I said, "Hold on, that's a lot of foreign words in one sentence. What do you do?" He said, "Well, I'm the program manager for the Navy's new bathyscaphe program, and the bathyscaphe Trieste has just been delivered to San Diego, and I'd like to brief the Commodore on this sort of submarine." And he's in charge of all submarines on the west coast of the United States, so maybe he'd be interested. I went down to see the Commodore. He said, "Yes, have him come to lunch. You might join us because we might find it interesting." He sat at a good table, so I thought, well, he's like score a nice lunch. So we sit in this lunch. The end of the Andy Recknitzer gives this presentation about this new thing called a bathyscaphe. At the end of the lunch, the Commodore said, "How can we help?" And of course, Andy was spring loaded for that. He said, "I need 2 submarine officers." That's the closest job description we can get to bathyscaphe pilot in the Navy. And the Commodore said, "Well, I think we can arrange that." So I was directed to send a radio message out to all the lieutenants in the submarines that were not deployed in Asia. And I figured that the end, the statistical number of how many, about 70 of them that would fit the being qualified in submarines and being lieutenants. Well, we got exactly this many volunteers. So I went down to see the Commodore. I said, "Sir, I'm I don't want to embarrass you and make a liar out of you, but nobody stuck their hand up. But since you have promised something, I think I must do this, and I'll be the first one." That's my Brer Rabbit act, don't throw me in the briar patch. And that was my way out of there to get into submarines. So how did I fit the Navy's high standards for bathyscaphe pilot? I was the only volunteer. It's a long story, but it's got dimensions to it that you have to understand to get to the sort of the irony of the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I joined in January 1959, and we had a lot of posed pictures. This is Jacques and myself inside the sphere of the bathyscaphe Trieste. And if you want to back up, I'll explain how it works briefly.
Good.
I'll try to be brief. What it is, it's a
really should know. This is such a great story.
It's a very, very simple device. It's just an underwater balloon because Auguste Piccard, who invented it, was a balloon pilot in the Swiss Army Reserve, going back to about the turn of the 20th century. And he said, you can apply the same ideas to an underwater balloon. You have a buoyant substance to give you lift, if you will, and a cabin hanging beneath it. So that ball you see hanging beneath it is a steel wall, a thick steel wall ball for the 2-person crew. And just to, you can see a kind of on the left side of that ball, looks like a shelf coming out. That's actually a viewport, 7 inches thick, made out of acrylic plastic. And so this balloon, underwater balloon, you can't fill it with air or helium or hydrogen because you can take a child's balloon in your hand and smash it flat. Not a good idea then in the ocean. So what you've got is it's filled with aviation gasoline because oil floats on water. So if you get enough of it in this can or this balloon structure with the zebra stripes on it, you get a lot of buoyancy. So it's simply, the operation is simply make it heavy, it goes down, make it neutrally buoyant, it stays where you want to be in the water column, and you get more weight and up you come. And that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Underwater balloon.
Excellent.
Yep.
You wonder, the people just looking at that would not understand that there's aviation fuel within the stripey part.
And
Well,
a lot of
the thing is that, 54,000 gallons. It was just one of the lighter fraction of petroleum that you could find anywhere in the world. I mean, something like benzene, something more exotic, you get more lift, but you can't find it everywhere. One thing the Navy has a lot of is aviation gasoline all over the world, wherever there's airplanes. And they used to get mad at me because the Naval Air Station in North Island, I go over and tank up 54,000 gallons. We'd operate for a while and then we would take it out of the water. Of course, we had to defuel it, if you will. And I get a chit back from the Navy, you know, a reimbursement, if you will, for the fuel. And they couldn't understand how somebody would, you know, buy that much and then give back most of it. But okay, they always thought submarine people were strange. So
That's
then-
right.
yeah, well, this is Sue Flood. You must know her. Sylvia, the underwater photographer,
Mhm.
BBC, yeah. And she came by to stay with us, and that helmet is one of mine. I own a commercial diving company in San Diego, I mean, in LA, Long Beach Harbor in a former life. This is one of the oldest, called a Jap hat, because they're made in Japan by, I think, Yokohama company. And it's pretty bad, but that's the state of the art. I guess we're going from alpha to omega. We just looked at this bathyscaphe, a very imaginative concept, and now we're looking at a, you know, kind of C.B. Gorman dive helmet that goes back to the late 1800s, perhaps. This is newer, but the same
Yeah.
idea, same design. It looks like it was built in about 2012, but I mean, 1912.
1912. Yeah. It's just, yeah, it's a nice, you know, just to talk about, you know, your move from the Navy and then kind of, you know, going into that kind of commercial space and having the commercial diving company there in San Diego. And
I remember those days.
yeah,
I think I first met you, Don, when you were actually in the more of an academic position at University of Southern California.
Yeah, I was the founding director of the Institute for Marine Coastal Studies as a dean and also professor of ocean engineering. How that ever happened, I'll never know. I mean, you're looking at a guy that failed his way through high school, the Naval Academy, and you know, it's just no hope for me. In fact, I was told by the officer who would move us around from job to job in the Navy and personnel that I was officially stupid.
oh my God.
No, that's a quote, unquote. You all are officially stupid, because I applied for nuclear power, and Americo had very strict standards about, you almost had to be a Nobel laureate to get into the program. Well, I was far from that. But you know, somebody has to be on the bottom of the pile, and that was me. Somehow I won that beauty contest at USC and ended up there as a dean and a tenured full professor.
Yeah,
Still mystery to this day, but as I told him, I'll take it. Looks good.
it was very good. It was about 1970, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's been 75, because I retired from the Navy in 75.
Yep, it was a
So
good move.
77, yeah, I think it was somewhere up the coast. We had a fundraising dinner for the faithful, and you were the featured speaker. So we've been cohorts for, what would that be, nearly a half century.
2 years.
Yeah. And then
It's a good start.
and you jumped off into the world of piloting too. You said that's on your list for this year is the.
Yeah, I'll make my last flight. This is a little aerobatic biplane that I bought. It's an experimental thing. That I had one cockpit was a matter of immense relief to my wife, Joan. It's not that she's afraid of the unknown. She has a private pilot's license. She just knew better, and was very happy to see me wobble off into the blue by myself. And it was a really fun airplane. It was so sensitive, you know, it almost anticipated what you were thinking. It's very quick, and because it was very quick, I eventually sold it. I was the lad I went through high school with became a NASA test pilot and was flying some pretty hairy stuff. In fact, he's the guy that introduced me to Neil Armstrong. And when he started advising me that I shouldn't be flying this airplane unless I flew it, you know, a couple hours every week to be proficient. Because
Right.
taking off was fun, and the air work going around was just great, you know, the Red Baron. But trying to get the damn thing back on the ground was always a challenge.
Yeah, it's the big difference, you know, between with submersibles and submarines. You know, gravity's kind of usually on your side. You know, usually drop some weight and float back up.
That's
Not
right.
so much for the airplanes.
Yeah. Well, I soloed actually when I was in submarine school, and yeah, I was in submarine school, and it was the local airport, and I soloed there. And then when I was at Texas A&M, I got my multi-engine seaplane ratings, and then later my glider rating. So I really enjoyed flying as an avocation, but it's pretty expensive, and that's all in my rearview mirror.
But you know, the perspective you get from going high in the sky is so important in terms of just putting things in place. And I think the other side of it is so many people only see the surface of the ocean without a clue about the incredible nature of what's below. So having your ups and downs has been very useful to you and to all of us who benefit from your experience.
And
Well,
it really-
excuse me.
oh, go ahead.
When I was at Texas A&M, it's a rather long and amusing story, which I'll not tell. For my graduate work, my research work for my master's thesis, I wanted to work on internal waves because they change the transmission of sound in the ocean. And as a submarine driver, that's pretty important. I mean, sometimes if the sound velocities are the right way in the ocean, you can get very close to the other guy. And sometimes he can hear you 10 miles away. You've got to know those variabilities, the density in the ocean. And so I thought I'd come back out to the Navy lab in the summer of '65 and work on internal waves, because my next job after graduate school was command of a submarine. But Admiral Muddy Waters, who you probably knew, Sylvia, the oceanographer of the Navy, came down to Texas A&M and sort of suggested that I go down to NASA Houston and see what they're doing in the way of remote sensing oceanography. What can you measure about our planet with Earth orbiting systems? And of course, 70% is the ocean. So the Navy got the nod and the money from NASA to pursue this. So he sent me down there and directed me to get involved in the program. So it seemed like I spent as much time in the back of NASA airplanes as I did on the research ship during my graduate school time. But then I got kind of interested because I noticed they didn't have an oceanographer astronaut. If you're a geologist astronaut, you can look down at a topographic feature and come back 100,000 years later and it's moved 4 centimeters. But air-sea interaction, the interaction between the ocean and the atmosphere is, microseconds. And the only way you can freeze frame that is to fly around and keep studying it with sensors and such. So that began to interest me. And so I went to my master's at A&M and faculty and said I'd like to take my doctorate because I didn't think NASA would want me with a master's degree. And as they said, you're not the fastest bunny in the forest, but we'll approve it, but just never do it professionally. Don't break anything, don't touch anything. So, because I was a solid B student, but I wasn't an outstanding scholar there at A&M. And so I did all my work in remote sensing oceanography. I think there were only about 8 of us in the United States at that time. It was really interesting what you could find out about the oceans by looking down at it. I failed to get in the astronaut corps because my eyes weren't good enough. And during the Apollo program, you just had 2 people. Both of them were rated military pilots. They would have trained me as they did with Owen Garrett and the guy from New Mexico, the geologist. They were civilians, but they were trained as military pilots just to qualify for Apollo. And I couldn't do that. So it wasn't until many years later that I found out that NASA had given the Navy the right to name the first oceanographer that would fly in orbit. And he started looking around for me. And I'd retired a couple, 3 years early. And so next life I'll do that, but I can't do it on this one. More than you wanted to know about the space program, but it just shows you how you never know where you're going to end up when you hand up for something,
It's really true. You have to be willing to, like put that hand up and then take those chances when they come along.
Never bored, never
No,
bored.
no boring moments.
And
But-
there's Alvin. I hope to be diving in Alvin in August. they're having a series of demo dives for the Chief of Naval Research and people of this sort. I have turned down in the past dives in Alvin three times because all I'd get is bragging rights and they wouldn't get any science. And I didn't feel it was correct or right for me to take a seat in one of these submersibles that should be occupied by a working oceanographer. So I've always said, no, thank you. But this time, these are sort of demo dives out of San Diego. And I hope to do it. That'd be my last time. It's not confirmed yet, but
It was so interesting, you know, I saw you, I guess it was like last year, we were at Oceanology over in the UK, and we were talking about some of the, you know, some of the basic advances and the really amazing advances that have happened in marine engineering and technology over the years, but then really how much some things have just kind of like stayed the same, you know, even with Alvin, with all of its new refits, it's still really based around a steel sphere with small ports.
Steel balls.
Steel balls, stop. and
oh, shucks.
and
Well,
then
And coming back to Alvin, we have history with it because
Yeah.
We were beating up the Trieste, the bathyscaphe, by going offshore in San Diego to do 4,000-foot dives. And it would take us a whole week to do one dive cycle to 4,000 feet. You have to tow it out, make the dive, tow it back, and then, of course, refurbish it. And so we sketched out an idea for a small submersible that could be carried on a mothership instead of towed, and that when you finish diving, you plug it into an electrical socket on board the ship, lift it aboard, and now you can travel a dive site back and forth on board the ship and not at tow speeds, which are about 5 knots with Trieste. And so we worked up a concept, called it CPUP, took it back to ONR, my master there, Captain Swede Momsen, and he said, Lieutenant Walsh, this is a great idea. We've got to get one of these. And I thought to myself, well, Magoo, you've done it again.
Yeah.
So
he didn't make you test the Momsen lung, did he?
no, that was his dad that did that.
Oh, his dad did that. Good.
Yeah. And then there was this kind of this theatrical pause, and I'm going to send it to Woods Hole. I say, what? And I mean, all credit to Woods Hole. They took a diamond in the rough, really rough, and Alvine, who the sub's named after, Alvin, and made it what it is today. It's had, I think, 3 or 4 complete rebuilds in 60 some odd years.
Yeah.
Arguably, it's the most productive scientific submersible in the world.
It was launched in 1964. It's not the same old Alvin that started out, the one that you just recently dived in, but the basic concept is the same. You go down with weights, you drop the weights to get buoyant enough to come back up to the surface.
Yeah.
And you can move around with the thrusters, with the batteries. Most of the batteries in most of the submersibles, even today, are like high-tech car batteries. They're lead acid, although they're getting,
Seeing a few lithiums coming along.
yeah, they're growing into the 21st century now with better storage and longer life and all of that, but it's pretty basic.
The steel sphere and small windows are still the
it's Alvin's will be 60 years next year, and you got to look backwards. 60 years before Alvin was built, that'd been 1904. The first, how many airplanes in the world? Half dozen in 1904. People ask me, how's this different from modern submersibles of today? And I say, look, it's like asking Wilbur Wright. He's standing in front of a 747. And you say, what are the differences between your airplane and that one? Well, that's 60 years. And so we only stayed 20 minutes on the bottom, cluck, cluck, and I get a lot of that. I mean, the Wrights only flew, 100 feet? Start somewhere.
you do,
Yeah. Anyway, that's history of that. Now, that's one of the 2 Russian Mir, M-I-R, which is the Russian word for peace, submersibles. I'd call them sort of 3rd or 4th generation submersibles, actually built in Finland for the Soviet Academy of Sciences in, I believe, 1988. They're capable of diving to 6,000 meters or 20,000 feet. I've made several dives in the mirrors on hydrothermal vents, on the Titanic ship, and on the World War II German battleship Bismarck, and also a kind of strange dive in Lake Geneva. That was funded by a gentleman, a billionaire named Frederick Paulson, another ocean elder.
Mhm.
And he sensed that the program in Russia at that time was beginning to collapse. In fact, the director of the institute told the guy running this program, they're yours. We need to junk them. We don't want them anymore.
Wow.
This is Anatoly?
Yeah, and Anatoly Sigalovich, and an old friend of 6 decades. And so I dove with him several times, but I think the most unusual time was in Lake Geneva. Although I was diving with Bertrand Piccard, and we were making a dive at the same place, the deepest place in Lake Geneva, which is around 900 feet. Yeah, I made that dive with him. I made that dive with his father in Jacques Piccard's sub called Forel, AP Forel, Forel, and now I was making that same dive with his son. So a little bit of symmetry there.
Fun. Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
witness to history. You're making history, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a good time, and heavy on PR and very light on productivity.
But we just got a few of the images here of some of the other
Yeah.
submersibles, you know, that ones can go into deep and deepish water,
Yeah,
deeper
Shinkai.
water.
Yeah. Yeah, Shinkai 6500 actually consulted for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries on the Shinkai 2000, I believe, which is the predecessor of this, at by 6,500 meters. That's what that 6,500 means. So it's a little deeper than 20,000 feet capability. And the Shinkai 2000 was 2,000 meters. And I got a contract from Mitsubishi to train the pilots for the first deep submersible, manned submersible that Mitsubishi built. And then I gave some advice on this one. I never made a dive. I've got into it, but I never been on a dive. It's nicely made, and it performed well, and it has performed well in
So I
support.
got to dive it. Don, I went down to the Nankai Trough in
I forgot about that. Yeah,
1991.
Yeah.
I didn't speak much Japanese, and the Japanese pilots, there are 2 pilots and 1 passenger on this one. They did not speak much English, but we spoke the common language of the ocean, and they played music on the way down. It was
Really?
Hotel California.
Yeah, they played Hotel California for you.
Yeah.
I think
I forgot you got a nice dive there in this one.
Yeah.
Speaking of music, when I dove with Tolia on the Rainbow Vents near the Azores, it was a 12-hour dive. So we parked next to a very nice vent with lots of bioactivity around it. Turned on the lights, could see everything, and had our lunch. And he teed up a yellow submarine on his tape deck.
of course
Oh, of
he did.
Things we have to do for science.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's Jim Cameron on top.
Another
of-
ocean elder.
I was on that expedition with Jim, and I was the last person to talk to him before he shut the hatch. I said, "Enjoy yourself, have fun, and find that damn fish," because
That's right.
on our deepest dive, Jock, neither one of us were scientists. We were engineers, like test pilots, and we thought we saw a fish at 11,000 meters.
Mhm.
And we got hooted down for years. And they were right, we were wrong. But at this time, I didn't know that, and I just said, "Have fun and find that damn fish." So this is after he came up, and then when he came up, I was the first one to greet him when he opened the hatch.
Yeah, that's great. I see he's got the Rolex
Oh.
around the wrist of the.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's,
that's right. Yeah, you got it. That
that's
Rolex is they're now making them. Rolex is now making them commercially.
Yeah, I just saw that. I was just like, whose wrist is big enough to carry that?
well, no, it is a little heavy because it's, even though the now the one that goes to 4,000 meters,
We
not,
made a full ocean depth one now.
no, but
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
But they make a one for
They do.
ordinary people such as us, but the it's still pretty heavy to have the capacity to go to 4,000 meters. But I like my little handy
You
dandy.
know, a little chronometer.
Yeah,
Me too. Well, they gave me one in 2010 at the 50th anniversary. Hailed me into the boardroom there in New York and gave me a very nice one. They inscribed it on the back. So that's a
Nice.
special one. I think
well,
I'll
we're,
be there for a long.
I think we both had a great association.
Yeah.
with Rolex. They are supporters of this expedition, among other things. I mean, they get behind Cameron, they get behind you, they've gotten behind me in various explorations. So, yeah, I'm.
Been good partners.
Where is that Rolex? I can. Is it on that?
It's
It's there
It's
on the
right-
wrist.
yeah, it's
isn't
on
it?
the wrist of
on
the.
the wrist. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't quite see the
Oh, I
watch.
can
You can
see
see the strap.
Yeah.
It's right on his forearm there.
Yep. So this is another full ocean depth system that's come online in recent years.
You were there to salute.
You've been in this one, yeah.
Victor Vescovo,
Yeah.
interesting guy. He's an adventurer. He's converted to our community now as an oceanographer explorer. When he first he's climbed 7 or 8 of the highest peaks in the world and done this and that. And he's got enough money to do that. He's in the financial world in Dallas, Texas. A retired Navy commander, Naval Reserve, and was in the intelligence business and very dedicated to the Navy, by the way. And he just wanted to go down to the deepest place in the ocean and stay as long as possible, and by himself, solo dive.
Yeah,
And-
it's like Jim's, yeah.
and set a record. And he did not even specify windows. He didn't want viewports. Keep it simple. I'll just ride this thing down and then hit the bottom and stay there for a while and come back up.
Check it
Cooler
out.
heads prevailed, and they said, well, it doesn't cost much to put 3 windows in it. And boy, is he glad he did that. And there's some pretty good stories about how he was gradually converted to one of us. And I don't know if you followed his expedition. You really ought to have him on if you haven't yet, because
You
it's
will.
quite an odyssey.
Yeah,
He's very good in front of camera or mic, and very low key. He's got I swear, an ego coefficient right around 0. And he's done some really great stuff. That round the world trip and mapping for the first time several 100,000 miles of seafloor, which is of hydrographic quality. Just send it to IHO in Monaco, International Hydrographic Office. And a lot of great stuff they've done. Yeah.
So consider the timeline. You and Jacques Picard were there in the Mariana Trench, 1960. Just a few. I mean, the anniversary is the 23rd of January. Like last,
yeah.
gave
last
a big
month.
celebration honoring you and the occasion just at the Explorers Club just last week. Right? And then 52 years later, it was Cameron going by himself to what was said to be the deepest part of the ocean. And then along comes Victor Vescovo, and not only goes once by himself, but then he goes again. And he went to the 5 deep places, the 5 deepest places in the major basins of the
right.
ocean. And he took your son, didn't he?
Yeah, that was Father's Day 2020. He had contacted me earlier and said, do you think Kelly'd like to make a dive? And I said, is the Pope a Catholic? Of course. But I said, Victor, let's make it clear. I was not calling in any chits, that, a favor or something. I know what each of these dives cost, because he was, if he had spare capacity, he was selling a dive for $1 million a seat.
Wow.
But his burn rate, you realize that he put $60 million of his own money into this sub. And then the burn rate to keep that system alive as a mothership and all that stuff went with it, $1 million a month.
Yeah.
So I don't begrudge him occasionally getting $1 million for some punter that would like want to ride down and have that experience. So anyway, that's all background. I'm saying, Victor, I know what these dives cost, and I know Kelly'd love it, and I'd be very proud. But don't ever attribute it to an ask from me. I would never do that. Of course, I don't want to believe it, I suppose. So on Father's Day, he actually dove. He and Victor stayed down longer than I did. They were down about 4 hours, and they got deeper than I did by about 84 feet. And the whole deal is Victor took him back to the same place I dove, because there are 3 pools at the bottom at Challenger Deep. There's the west, the east, and the center pool. And I was in the west pool, and no one has ever gone there after that. Jim and the others, well, Jim went to one of the other places.
Mhm.
Victor has piloted this sub to the Challenger Deep 15 times.
Nice.
And when I was on the first expedition, we made his first dive to Challenger Deep, and he went down, came by himself, came back up, spent quite a few hours on the bottom, and then over a period of 4 days, they did 3 more dives. And that shows you the reliability, the repeatability, and the safety of this system. Would go anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And that's Victor's real gift to ocean studies.
But do we know really, really, really how deep the ocean is in the deepest place?
Well, that was what he was after. He did a lot of the other trenches. But yeah, Challenger Deep, I think, without any argument, he kept measuring it, had the best equipment possible that could measure from the surface down to the bottom, as well as his repeated dives and the equipment he had on board the subs and the landers themselves. And he was pretty fastidious about getting all the data and trying to make a decision as to what the deepest place is.
Yeah. This is still your dream machine
Of course,
that you like to do and
I
really
like-
improve the view in the full ocean depth submersibles.
we've talked about this, again, dreams back in the 80s with John Craven and a whole host of people who wanted to try to solve the problem to how do we use glass
Yeah,
to the deepest part of the ocean as a clear sphere that will withstand pressure,
yeah.
get stronger as it goes deeper.
Well, the sphere is the strongest shape, as we know.
Yeah,
And glass is inherently, the theory is, of course, very, very strong,
Right.
but it's also very brittle, and it's easy to shatter. Now, I realize there's been some advanced work done to get around that problem, and also Patrick Leahy at Triton Subs, they want to build a full ocean depth glass sphere. You probably know about this.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't followed it, but
Yeah, we've done a tremendous amount of research on it, and it's certainly buildable, but it's really a struggle to get past some of the the hurdles with the funding and so forth. And,
if we had a NASA-like budget, it would have happened long ago.
sure.
but it'd be great to one day see real advance in the material science to allow us to have this sort of this kind of view that we really enjoy already in the in the shallower subs.
Yeah. Well, my opinion is that the heavy lifting in the future is going to be done by unmanned vehicles. There'll always be room for manned vehicles. I'm not saying
Mhm.
say one, one instead of the other. But I think in terms of the population of submersibles, the big growth is going to be in unmanned vehicles.
Well,
Because,
it already is. They're,
yeah, sure.
but it depends on what you want to do. I
Yeah.
think that being there is a whole level of quality
Mhm.
observations. It's I talked with our fellow ocean guy, Bob Ballard, about this many times. where he said, "Oh, submarines are dead with humans," although he's used them to good advantage himself as a geologist, as a biologist, and really for anyone who wants to. It's look, a picture's worth 1,000 words. I get it. I love words, but an experience has to be worth at least 1,000 pictures. Being there makes all the difference. And anyway, so I think there'll always be a place like, who needs to fly up in the sky? You don't have type astronauts, do you? Got plenty of instruments that can take pictures. But ask any astronaut, ask Kathy Sullivan, who went down with Victor to the deepest place in the ocean, and she's also gone very high in the sky. Would she trade that for 10,000 pictures? I think not on your life.
Yeah.
No. Well, and of course, there's always a lot of trainable monkeys available. like the Soviets did. Yeah, I agree with you completely. And I rhetorically say, well, why man? And I've asked a couple of people about that.
Why not woman?
Oh, now.
Roger Ravel and I were at some meeting up on the Oregon coast many, many years ago, and we're having a sunset libation looking out over the ocean. And I said, Roger, why man? And he didn't pause. He said, because you can't surprise an instrument. And and then Jim Cameron, I thought, said it very nicely too. He said, what kid wants to grow up to be a robot? And my answer is, look at People magazine. It's what, 6 decades old. People want to know what other people are doing. You've got to make it personal. The moon flights, when they sent the unmanned vehicle up there to the moon, it's picked up some rocks and came back. That was very interesting as a feat of technology and operational excellence. But when the two of us were up there, that was a whole different game. And it's something. It's a question will never be answered. It's been around the space community, as you intimated, for a long time, and for us the same thing. Yeah. I believe there's going to be room for manned submersibles. It's just that I think the bulk of the work will be done by very smart AUVs, because AI is coming on so well, and other places in material science, the prices are coming down and performances are going up. Because as we used to say, 20, 30 years ago about AUVs, autonomous untethered vehicles. Right. When you put it in the water, it's half lost. That's Dick
right. You've seen that so many times, but you're right. They're getting better, so much better. Mm-hmm. But
so I wish you well, Sylvia. I don't think I'm young enough to see this one, but
we'll see. We'll see. It's not doesn't take that. It won't take that much to build it, really. Good. But just thinking about like these change over time. I mean, I had to bring this picture back up because this is your kind of your childhood playground here back in Alameda, California, and this is the building that DOER used to occupy in the Alameda Marina, but it's this historic space where this is the first all aluminum landing craft being kind of birthed out of this building. And you used to sell newspapers at the gate there as a kid.
Yeah. I lived 10 blocks from this particular site.
Yeah,
it's too bad you had to leave there, but it was a perfect setup for you folks.
Yeah, but it's just such a just talking about like how fast change happens just like in our lifetimes.
Yeah,
kind of gone from the
theological change.
Yeah, here it is when we used to be there.
Yeah,
and with with subs in the building,
and you were part of building the part of Deep Ocean Engineering, the predecessor to DOER.
Yeah,
I was on the board for 10 years at your invitation.
It was great to have you on board.
And then here it is today, being encroached on by condominiums.
I know.
It's just so it's just this change. These kinds of changes can just happen so quickly, and what can we? It's just it's shocking to see how fast change happens just in our own kind of where we've grown up in our own hometowns. But also,
how do you think the aviators feel about your new digs? You got a submarine company in the middle of a naval air station.
I know. The adaptive reuse. Yeah.
complain too much.
Yeah.
Oh, hello. See a lot of those in the Arctic.
Well,
On one trip I made to the North Pole on a Russian nuclear icebreaker, we were in the ice and not moving very fast. And one of these, well, a lady, female polar bear came up to the ship, just curious. And you know, she was downwind from us, so she could smell all the cooking and so on. And you know, just came right in like a guided missile and was right next to the ship, just looking up, wondering if those things were pretty good to eat. All the guests were leaning over the edge with their cameras with, you know, telephoto lens this long. So when you get something that close, you don't get you get a nice picture of the muzzle of the animal, but not the whole animal. And I just opened the port, actually a window on the room I was in, and just leaned out, and there she was right below me.
Yeah.
Out of
Beautiful.
reach. And
so change is really upon us.
This is just, I actually found this picture because this shows a glacier in 1932. And then the same area again in 1988.
Wow.
And, you know, just looking at how quickly things are changing. Here you are in Greenland here, yeah?
yeah, this is the biggest glacier in Greenland. And in fact, it's the biggest one in Europe because Greenland considers themselves part of Europe. So this is the biggest glacier in Europe. And I fiddled around on top of that for a while. But
And
It's disappearing
it's
too.
disappearing too.
Yeah.
And here's a great old polar star, you know, one of our old icebreakers.
that's going to go straight from the Coast Guard to the Smithsonian. It's so old.
Right?
Yeah, I've been made, that's called an ice berth, where you
Yeah.
park in the ice. You can see they got a gangway down there at the right side of the image there. You can see it down the ship. And we just pile off. I made 3 trips to the North Pole with Russian nuclear icebreakers, but it's the same drill. You make an ice berth and you all climb off and carry on. And they put a little barber pole up where the crewman takes a GPS handheld out, plugs in this barber pole, and then we all do some of the maypole dance around this pole, around the North Pole. And the things you see, you couldn't believe it. I mean, there's people with tuxedos on, penguin suits, of course, penguins, and then
In the Antarctic, yeah.
people crawling around. I went around the world on my hands and knees, and
Well,
And
there
the
was ice. There was ice at the North Pole then.
oh yeah, the Russian crewmen just shake their head. But watching that massive ship work ice up to 4 feet thick at 3 knots is
Incredible.
something. It is.
And noisy, right?
Very noisy. And our lecture room for doing our natural history lectures for the guests was right at the water line. So they start working the ice, and yeah.
What
There I
do
am driving the research ship Keldysh. This was the mothership for the Mir submersibles.
Okay. Yeah,
That
you
place,
look in red and orange.
Forest Club.
Well, you know, we're coming up.
Yeah.
We're coming up on the top, well, close to where we need to get to some.
I want to go quickly to the Antarctic if we can.
All right, we're going to take a quick peek here, but we've got a
Move
great
on.
queue of questions and very little time.
Okay, but let's snap through these pictures.
Here's Don in the
Yeah, fumaroles actually in the Kuriil Islands. I was just keeping the people out of there because you don't know when when you're walking around on those things, you don't know where you're going to put your foot in a pot of really hot water. So, and
then you'll have no foot.
sulfur, I couldn't smell any sulfur coming up. I couldn't smell anything for a week. All I could smell was
Man.
sulfur. Yeah.
All right, now we're in the Antarctic,
Yeah,
Trap penguins. Yeah.
and you're going there in next
just a
week.
couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
there's
This is at Port Lockroy. There's some Gentoo penguins to the left of me. You
I
can
see
see.
them back there.
but isn't there one of those peaks named after you, Don?
Actually, a ridge near Cape Hallett called the Walsh Spur. But to be realistic about the whole thing, a spur in the pantheon of ridges is equivalent to a speed bump. in a parking lot. It's not.
So you
much
got a
to
speed bump named after you?
I wouldn't mind having something in the ocean named after me. That'd be quite a but that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I was hoping if we talk long enough, ladies, that I wouldn't be troubled by questions I can't answer. But I will tell
That's
the
all right.
people watching.
I'll try
If
to.
if I don't know the answer, I'll make something up.
All right. Okay. Let's see. We're going to take a short one here to start with from Richard, who says, we hear about space tourism, but is there a future for DOW tourism? So I think that means
Deep ocean water.
deep ocean water tourism.
I think so. I thought Mike McDowell with the Deep Ocean Expeditions was taking people down to the Titanic and Bismarck and hydrothermal vents was onto something. The problem is getting the submersibles that are economically viable. When you had the 2 mirrors, you could take 4 people down a day because you had a pilot plus 2 in each sub, and that was a pretty good business. But then the Russian Academy of Sciences began to play games, and we couldn't charter those subs anymore. So I don't know, economically, if you could charge enough, you'd have 1s and 2s, and it would hardly support a business. So there is a future out there. I just don't know when it might happen again.
Yeah.
We were there, but because we couldn't get the subs, we're not there anymore.
Yep, exactly. Victoria is asking, do you think the program you were previously involved with NASA has inspired the latest SWOT mission designed to provide us with highly detailed 3D views of rivers, lakes, and oceans, promising to improve our understanding of the Earth's water cycle and the role that the ocean plays in our lives?
Yes.
Yes, very good. Like, short answer, nice.
Oh, when I left the program, the tough nut to crack then was to be able to remotely measure salinity. They finally figured out how to do it. In coastal waters, if it's absolutely clear, then you can use laser systems just in aircraft to do a bathymetry, and sometimes down to what I think maximum done is about 30 meters, which is pretty damn good. But most places, the coastal waters aren't that clear.
Yeah.
Loaded with nutrients, which, like a bowl of minestrone. And so you just don't have the clarity of water. If you see clear water, or Sylvia knows what that means, it's dead. There's nothing living there. That's not a good thing.
All right. Sharisa says, what is a discovery you think might be made in the next decade or next century in the ocean?
Wow. I'd have to think about that. I'm sorry, I can't give you a really good answer. Every time we go into the ocean, we discover stuff.
It's true.
It's not anticipated. And I know Congress doesn't like to hand out money we just want to go look around. Just look.
Yeah.
What's your specific? What are your answers? And sometimes people ask you, what's your anticipated outcome? And a lot of time you have to say, I don't know. I just want to go look. And the funding.
Why would you bother to go?
Yeah. And if you tell them what you're going to do, they say, well, what are the results going to be? And they don't understand science.
Yeah, it's, I think a lot of the things we will find are going to be very small. We start looking at the microbes and the viruses and things in the ocean. There could be some really interesting stuff there.
I suspect you put your finger on something there, Liz, and that is, I think the big discoveries may come from the extremophiles that are being found in the deep trenches. And Alan Jameson is doing a lot of that good work, and the things that live under high pressure, high temperature, terrible conditions. And there's some thought that maybe life on our planet originated in a situation like that, where, in a manner of speaking, the situation is fairly stable. If extremophiles, of course, the outer skin of our planet was getting bombarded by bits of planets in space, and it was it was methane atmosphere and ammonia and all that. And for a few billion years, it was not very habitable and very, very variable. And whereas the bottom of the ocean, the proto-ocean, we had the extremophiles, which didn't have that much variety in their circumstance that they were living in. So that'd be my answer there. I think that we just, hadal biology is, that's the deep trenches, which are only 2% of the floor of the ocean, the deep trenches. I think that probably is one of the frontiers.
Mhm.
My answer to that is the greatest discovery, well, is the magnitude of our ignorance. That's the greatest discovery so far.
We just have to keep plunking away at that. Okay, April is asking, when do you think the average citizen will be able to afford a ride in a submersible?
Hey, we're working on that.
We're working on it.
Well, if a ride in a submersible is what you want, there are a number of what's so-called tourist submarines throughout the world. And I say a number, I'm thinking maybe between 15 and 20, who are located in places like the Virgin Islands, Hawaii, where there's stuff to see.
Yeah.
Now, they don't dive much more than 100 feet, but to see things, to really appreciate the oceans, if you're kind of a lay person, color's a big part of that. And one company, Atlantis Submarines, which is based in Canada, they pioneered this whole field. And one of their sites, I think it was at Waikiki, they put lipstick on your hand. And as you go down to 100 feet, it turns black.
Sure.
Why does it turn black? Because red is the first color to be extinguished as you go down with that, filtered out, if you will, by the ocean. And the last color is what, blue-green. So after 100 feet, it's not very rewarding for people, other than bragging rights. I got to 150 feet. Get down to 100 feet, got all that stuff in that upper layer of the ocean to look at, and you got color. So those rides, I don't know what they cost today, maybe $80 a person, and it's a well worth it. About an hour-long experience. So going deeper than that, that's in your wheelhouse, not mine.
Yeah, well, as you know, most of life on Earth lives in the dark because light penetrates only a very limited way in the ocean, yet the ocean is full of life from the surface to the greatest depth. So we really are just beginning to appreciate the nature of life on Earth.
Yeah.
The deeper we go, the less we know, but the more new discoveries we find.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Our last question is from Martin. And he's asking, do you think the ocean alkalinity enhancement and carbon air removal industrial scale projects are worth doing? What environmental impacts might they have?
I think what he's referring to is the sequestering carbon by pumping it down to the seafloor. I wrote a magazine article on that last year. I think there's actual prototype work going on right now, I think in Scandinavia, where they're moving towards an operational system of taking CO2 out of the air and pumping it down to the seafloor, where it binds with material on the seafloor, so it is sequestered. It's not going to come back up. I think there's a future there for doing that.
Most important thing is to protect the natural mechanisms that have existed, that have gotten us to where we are, and to try to heal the harm that we've done. But we have to hurry.
Yeah. Protect.
It's really invasive. You just have you like a deep sea drill hole, like we have in the Mohole projects, things like that. It's not, you're not doing a lot of damage to the seafloor. You just poke a hole in the seafloor and then pump the gas down below it. And as far as I can tell, it has there's no potential harm to the ocean, not like ocean mining or something.
Yeah, right.
Except that there is life below the bottom of the seafloor, as much as 2 kilometers below the bottom of the ocean. They're little guys, but hey, I can't tell you exactly what they're good for, but they couldn't tell what we're good for either.
It's all of it is a balancing act, isn't it? I mean,
it really is.
Good and evil and all of that.
So,
but we are at the top of the hour now, and so we're going to have to sign off for this time. But Don,
we need you to bring him back.
We need you to come back again sometime.
Well, that's one thing I have no poverty in sea stories. I'm
That's a
absolutely-
good thing. We'd love to have you come back and share some more sea stories. And maybe talk about some of your other adventures.
That's the
and-
name of my unauthorized autobiography. Sea stories, conversations with myself. Sea is spelled S-E-E, things seen.
Things seen, absolutely.
Yeah, well, you certainly have seen a lot and more to come.
But before we close today, Sylvia and I would like to say thank you. Thank you so much, Don. Thank you to the Ocean Elders and to everyone who tuned in to have a conversation with us today. We really appreciate everybody diving in and participating. We're grateful to everyone, and water connects us all. We're going to be back at the end of this month, and we're going to be revisit echinoderms again with
Oh,
Dr. Rich Moy. And until then, please remember,
you got to take care of the ocean as if,
your life depends on it.
because
It does.
It does. Thank you, John. It's been great to catch up. Hope to see you in person again soon.
I hope so. Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.